So in episode 3, where I had the opportunity to talk about the Azure Stack HCI overview, I kind of touched upon the Azure Stack HCI ecosystem that is available, which means basically how customers today can go and deploy Azure Stack HCI on different type of platforms that are available, like for instance, do it yourself, validated nodes and integrated nodes. So in this episode, we're going to delve deeper into the difference between the integrated system and the validated node. Hello, welcome back, and thanks again for tuning into Jayant on Cloud. My name is Jayant. I work as a Senior Principal Engineering Technologist at Dell Technologies. Please hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified as and when I upload new videos. Now in this episode, I'm going to talk about the Azure Stack HCI integrated system versus the validated node. So without wasting much time, let's dig right into it. Alright, so now here is a slide that talks about the Microsoft ecosystem for Azure Stack HCI. So like I discussed in my previous episode where I talked about the Azure Stack HCI overview, we discussed the DIY approach where customers can simply go and deploy Azure Stack HCI operating system on the nodes that are on the hardware servers that are already available with them. And the other option that customers have today is there are number of hardware OEM partners where they have validated these systems to work on Azure Stack HCI, so that they can go and deploy HCI on top of them. The other approach, probably the biggest differentiator, is the integrated system. So as you can see on the left-hand side, right, the value and the customer experience keeps going up as you start going up from DIY all the way to integrated systems. So now in this episode, I'm going to kind of probably delve a little deeper to see what is really the difference between validated and integrated systems. Not so much for DIY. Remember, every customers today do not want to get into the business of IT. We all know about that, right? So I think every technical solution provider talks about it. Now, so this episode, we're going to limit this conversation just to validated node versus integrated systems. Okay, so there are as many as about close to 200 plus Azure Stack HCI certified hardware, which includes both the integrated nodes as well as the validated node. And all of these certified hardware has been put up in the Microsoft Azure Stack HCI hardware catalog website. So let's go check out that website, right? So if you go Google Azure Stack HCI hardware catalog and just scroll down, you will see Azure Stack HCI catalog and just click on that. So you have Discover Solution. So let's click on and browse the catalog. Now on the left-hand side, as you can see, there is integrated system and validated node. Now, so it's pretty clear, right? So Microsoft either recommends a validated node approach or an integrated system, and certainly not a do it yourself approach. So if you go with the integrated node, right? So there are a number of partners again, right? So there's Data On, Dell Technologies, HPE, Lenovo, and so on. So let's find out who actually supports integrated systems. So let's for instance take Dell Technologies. So Dell Technologies today has AX740, AX640. These are the 14th generation servers. So they are actually equivalent of the Dell PowerEdge series, if you're familiar with, for instance, Dell PowerEdge R70, Dell PowerEdge R640. They're pretty much the same family of servers. Remember, these servers are purpose built for Azure Stack HCI. So this is very, very important to know. So maybe I can just quickly show you what it really means by purpose built. Now, if you see the Dell Technologies, integrated, system for Microsoft Azure Stack HCI, which we have online. If you just go and Google this, you will find that one of the nodes here. So if you probably let me try and zoom in a little bit. Can you see this? So it actually says Azure Stack HCI on the bezel itself. So which means we at Dell Technologies, we approach the complete productized approach, right? So that's very clear from us. So when we say it's an integrated system, it's a completely productized solution from Dell Technologies. So let's go back to the hardware catalog. And so, like I said, there are a number of systems. So if I go into, let's say, validated node instead of the integrated system, if I go into validated node, and let's say let me try and click on Dell Technologies. As you can see, there is nothing. So a lot of customers today ask me, hey, Jen, the Dell PowerEdge series, the R740 or the R640, whichever is there, it's technically similar to the AX640 or the AX740. Can I use them? The answer is no, because we haven't validated the PowerEdge series on Azure Stack HCI. It's only the integrated nodes, and all the integrated nodes are prefixed with AX, which means it's an AX640 or a 740 if it's a 14th generation server, or it's the 650 or the 750 or the 7525, which is the AMD offering, or all the 15th generation servers. So this is something that I kind of wanted to touch upon, right? So when this is from a Dell Technologies perspective, our approach is very clear. So we want to stick to the integrated. So with this slide, I kind of want to quickly compare. I know this slide is a very busy one here, but I still want to kind of go through some of the important attributes while we compare the integrated versus the validated node. Now it's certified for Azure Stack HCI. So in case of integrated, it's completely certified. So what does it really mean by certified? So let me quickly jump into the Windows Admin Center and go into the server clusters here. Okay. Well, don't worry about it. I have a separate session dedicated for the Dell Open Managed Integration for Windows Admin Center, so that I'm going to show it to you later. But just to show you what we really mean by the Azure Stack HCI certified. So as you can see, Dell Open Managed Integration is a snap-in that's available within the purview of Windows Admin Center. So if I just click on that, it says Dell Open Managed Integration, and it says Microsoft Azure Stack HCI certified. Okay, so this is very important. So if it is just a PowerEdge server, it wouldn't say that it's a certified server at all. So just because it's an AX node, maybe I can just quickly do an inventory. So as you can see here, it's an AX740 XT, which means, like we saw in the hardware HCI hardware catalog in the Microsoft website, under Dell Technologies integrated portfolio, only the AX nodes are validated, which is nothing but the integrated system. So let's jump back into the slide. Now, because we are going with a completely productized approach, we support the entire solution up to 5 years, right? And it's an ongoing effort. For example, Microsoft keeps releasing the monthly and quarterly software updates. Keep in mind, even the Dell hardware catalog is released every quarter. So which means we keep releasing the latest firmware, the latest drivers, latest BIOS every quarter. So those binary bits have to be continuously validated against the integrated system, right? So when we say solution support up to 5 years, so it's a continuous engineering validation approach that we go through. So customers really don't have to really spend their engineering efforts to validate the systems. So when we say, hey, this is certified for these versions, in fact, we even post the validated versions that are supported. For example, what is a BIOS version, what is a firmware version, what is a network card firmware, all of that is actually published so customers can go take a look at it and gain that confidence with Dell Technologies, because we have validated this along with Microsoft engineering. So that is I mean, this is a huge thing, right? If you think about customers today, they're very, very finicky about changing the firmware levels or the BIOS levels on the hardware, because they don't, like the famous going says, ain't broken, don't fix it. A lot of customers think that, hey, you know what, I don't want to break something, so let me not just do an update, right? But then to really take advantage of the latest and the greatest binary bits, because there are a lot of issues that we would have faced in the field. We want to kind of go and fix that. So we want to ensure, both not just from Dell perspective, also from Microsoft, that all customers constantly keep updating their binaries. It could be a hardware update or it could be a software update as frequently as possible. And the third option that you can see is a full stack validation from engineering. So this is exactly what I talked about. So when I say it's the full complete stack, it's an ongoing validation effort that is carried out between Dell and Microsoft. Remember, it's an integrated. So if you go into quickly, go into this and say what really Microsoft recommends. Do they recommend a validated node or an integrated node? So let's go check it out. All right. So if I go into Azure Stack HCI integrated systems and go into the docs here. All right. So if I just scroll down, so basically the Microsoft documentation talks about the Azure Stack HCI features and the architecture and so on. And if you keep scrolling further, it says Azure integration benefits, what you need for Azure Stack HCI, hardware and software. So if you read this paragraph, Microsoft recommends purchasing integrated systems built by hardware partners and validated by Microsoft to provide the best experience running Azure Stack HCI. So it's pretty clear, right? So this is where the true engineering comes into the picture, the joint effort engineering. So I'm going to show, as and when I keep talking about the different, differentiated attributes when I compare the integrated versus validated. So I will keep showing you the live demo just to kind of provide justification as to how we build the integrated system in a joint engineering effort with Microsoft. So this is the Microsoft and OEM joint development. So all of this, as you can imagine, right? So the moment we talk about integrated system, it's a joint engineering effort from Dell and Microsoft. That's exactly what the Microsoft documentation also says, right? So they recommend the integrated approach, which means that there's a joint engineering effort between Dell and Microsoft. So I want to kind of quickly show you what is that joint engineering really all about, right? So one of the things that we do, if you just click on, if I go into Windows Admin Center, so if I go into the settings and go into extensions, so this is where the third-party OEM partners or any ISVs can bring in their value-added, solutions and integrate with the Microsoft Windows Admin Center SDKs. Now, if I go with Dell, for instance, because it's already installed, so there is a Dell Open Managed integration, as you can see. The latest is a 2.3 version, which we have recently released. If you just scroll down, there are two available snap-ins. The one of them says it's a create snap-in. Okay, so what does create snap-in really mean? So when you say create snap-in, there is a snap-in that is available through the WAC SDK, which allows customers to update the hardware binaries to the latest and greatest before it is even being added to the cluster and eventually go on to create a cluster out of it. So let me just show you how that is actually done. So I'm in Windows Admin Center. So there is an option where I can go and create a cluster out of it. And it says there are two options, the Windows Server version and the Azure Stack HCI. So we will choose Azure Stack HCI. Select the server location, say all servers in one site. And if you want to do a stretch cluster between two sites, then you select the second option. So for now, let's select all servers in one site and just click on create. So this is a Microsoft Windows Admin Center wizard, right? So basically it has a number of steps that you can see on the left hand side. It checks the prerequisites, right, on the particular server, right? There are a number of things that it checks, whether the right roles are involved, right features are enabled on the server, right operating system is installed on the server, whether it's part of the domain. All of that is checked as part of this complete workflow. And then you have add service. So let's click on next, and then we put in the admin credentials. So remember, every server that you go on to add to create a cluster first needs to be part of the domain, right? Very, very important. So that's why you see this is already part of the domain. So as you can see, all the 4 servers have been added, which is the AX740 XTs. If I just click on next, it says join a domain. Now, since it's already part of the domain, so I don't have to carry this step, so I can just click next. Install the feature. So this is exactly what I meant, right? There are a number of HCI OS features like the data dedupe, Hyper-V roles, BitLocker encryption, DCB, failover clustering. All of these features are automatically enabled in this entire workflow which is the creation of the cluster. All right, so now it optionally also checks if there are any latest updates that are available for the Azure Stack HCI OS. So you can just, as and when they're available, you can just click on install updates and it will automatically install the latest and the greatest update patches to all the 4 nodes in this cluster. Okay. Then I click next. This is an important thing. So when we talk about, what is this integration really all about? What is the joint engineering between Dell and Microsoft all about? This is exactly what we're talking. So when I say, for instance, this is a Microsoft Windows Admin Center workflow, what we have done is we've jointly engineered this with Microsoft. Now what we have done is using that create snap-in plugin that I showed you in the extensions. So the Dell Open Manage integration is now popping up right within the Windows Admin Center cluster creation workflow, right? So which means it gives me the ability to do the hardware update even before the nodes are added, being part of the cluster, right? So this is beautiful. So this is exactly what the differentiation that Dell brings to the table, right? So if I just click on next update source, then I select either it's an online update or an offline update. There are customers who do not want to simply connect to the internet at some point of time, so they can either choose an offline update as well. For now, let's select the online update, and as you can see, these servers, remember, they're not still part of the cluster. We are just updating the bare metal servers. Right now, they're just bare metal, right? And then just click on summary and then click update, say yes, okay? And it starts downloading the bits and starts pushing the firmware. All of that is done automatically. This is so beautiful, right? Think about it. From a customer standpoint, they don't really have to bother about updating this themselves, because a lot of customers, what they do today, as part of the validated node, for instance, right? So validated nodes are validated for a particular version of the firmware and drivers, right? Now, not necessarily they're at the greatest, latest and the greatest firmware levels or the BIOS levels. So it really, customers have to do it themselves, update every single bit, and then update the hardware, and then install the Azure Stack HCI operating system on top of it. See the amount of manual effort that is involved just to create a cluster, right? So this is where we are completely avoiding all of those customers' guesswork, right? By introducing all of this automation. And truly, this could not have been achieved without the joint engineering effort between Dell and Microsoft. All right, so the next difference is the validated upgrades from one major version to the other. Now, if you look at the validated nodes, right, generally they're validated for a particular version of the operating system. For example, so currently shipping version is 21H2. So sooner or later, we're going to have 22H2. Remember, in a validated node, not only is that validated node, certified to work on Azure Stack HCI, but the same node is also certified to work on a number of other operating systems, for example, Linux or Windows Server, and so on and so forth, right? It's not specifically designed only for Azure Stack. It's Azure Stack HCI exclusively. In case of Dell integrated systems, like we saw, even the bezel says Azure Stack HCI in the logo. So which means this particular node is only supported for Azure Stack HCI OS. So with that, it gives us a lot of flexibility for integrated partners. So which means, they keep on testing this. So testing any new, version of the operating system is an ongoing effort. Support metrics specific to Azure Stack HCI, needless to say, because this particular system, especially the integrated system, is designed only to work for Azure Stack HCI. So we keep releasing the newer support metrics. So remember when I talked about the Dell approach in terms of, we keep releasing the newer firmware and firmware updates and the driver update and the BIOS update every quarter. So we keep publishing the latest supported binary bits online, so that customers can actually, there's a link for it, customers can go check it out themselves and what is the latest that is supported, and those are the bits that we actually make it available as and when customers do an update using lifecycle management updates cluster-aware update feature that's actually inbuilt into Windows Admin Center. Integrated lifecycle management via WAP, right? So when I say integrated lifecycle management, it's just not about just doing, pushing the firmware updates or software updates, right? So the ability to do everything. For example, being able to monitor and being able to report the inventory of the servers, like each and every firmware versions, document each of these, because a lot of customers go through a lot of governance and documentation, right? So it's very, very important. So this is exactly what it means. So when we provide the plugin, using the plugin, we're able to capture all of that information, within the purview of Windows Admin Center. So automated cluster-wide LCM experience. So it's not just about one server, right? So when you go to Windows Admin Center, it kind of, you get a holistic view of all the servers and their versions and everything, right within the purview of Windows Admin Center. So cluster level compliance and remediation for cluster expansion. So think about customers who want to kind of upgrade their cluster or expand their cluster. So today they may be with just 4 nodes, and tomorrow they may want to add 2 additional nodes, for instance, right? Now, if these 2 nodes are going to be part of the cluster, so we have something known as the cluster expansion mechanism, in which it basically goes and checks, validates. So let me just quickly jump into the real, into the live demo here. So go into Dell Open Managed Integration and click on, let's go to update. Okay, let's go to configure, and under configure you have expand cluster. So when I click on add nodes, so there are a number of things. So when I click on add nodes, so primary prerequisite, it needs to be installed with the Azure Stack HCI operating system. So in this case, it's 21H2. So after it is installed with the operating system and then added to the domain, we go and check the high-level compatibility. Basically, it runs a series of checks to make sure the nodes are connected to the domain. Like for instance, nodes must be part of an existing cluster, whether they are part of an existing cluster or not. All those prerequisite checks are checked, right? And then when it comes to licensing, right? So whether it has the right valid licensing, right? For example, whether it has the iDRAC licensing that is required for the Open Managed Integration for Windows Admin Center. And then the hardware configuration profile. So this step basically validates all the selected nodes to ensure and follow Dell recommended hardware configurations, right? So all of this, as you can see, is checked before a particular node is added to the cluster. So this is exactly what I spoke about when I meant cluster level compliance and remediation for cluster expansion. So when you have this kind of a feature, it makes customers' job that much more simpler and easier. They don't really have to go through the mess of doing all of this themselves. It's kind of an automated, right? It's kind of limited in case of validated node. It's not fully integrated, but it's there to do. So remember, so a lot of validated nodes OEM partners today still don't have the integration capability, like Dell, for instance, the Open Managed integration for Windows Admin Center. So you still have to use a separate console to manage the hardware separately. So that means you're talking about two different consoles, right? So with the integrated approach, it makes that much more easier. That means your Open Managed integration is right within the purview of Windows Admin Center. So that way customers don't have to play around with multiple tooling or multiple consoles. The other one is the dynamic CPU core. So dynamic CPU core, for example, like we spoke about, Microsoft charges today $10 per core per month for the Azure Stack HCI clusters. For example, if I just jump into the demo again, so there is an option known as configure. So let's click on configure. Okay, so there's an option that you see here. It's called update CPU core count. So remember, in this case, there are four AX740 XT nodes with 6248R processor, which means that it's 24 core. So there are two processors in each nodes, which is 48, and multiply that by number of nodes, which is 4 in this case. So you get a total of 192 physical cores. So which means by default, all the 192 physical cores are exposed to Azure. So Azure will generate a bill end of the month, which generates, in this case, it could be $1,920, right? Now, what if the customer is not using all the physical cores, right? So this is where we provide an option to the customers. If they're not using all the cores, they can just go and update the cores. Now remember, updating the cores is not easy, right? So when you have to update the cores, you basically have to evacuate the node, right? Because you have to go into the BIOS to update the cores. So you have to evacuate the node, which means you have to live migrate the virtual machines, and then reboot the node, go into the BIOS, change the physical core count, right? Change it to whatever it is, and then reboot it back up, rebalance the workloads, and then identify the next node, evacuate that node, and so on and so forth, right? It's a repetitive thing, and it's a very manual effort. So in this case, what you've done is we've completely automated this. So let's take a look at it. So if I click on update cores, so for example, right now, the maximum cores is now exposed to Azure, which is 192. So I can bring that down to maybe just 112 cores. Okay. See the option here, apply and reboot now, or I can apply at next reboot. Okay. So what this means is, let's say if I click on apply and reboot, if I click on confirm, which I'm not going to do right now, but if I do that, what happens is each node is automatically, the virtual machines on each nodes are automatically live migrated. The node is evacuated, the node is rebooted, and the core count is changed in the BIOS, and the node is node comes back, and then it is joined back to the cluster. The workloads are rebalanced again, and the same thing, it identifies the next node, and so on and so forth. Imagine if you have just 4 nodes, it may not take a significant amount of time, even for you to do it manually. Imagine when you have 16 nodes in a cluster, right? It takes awful lot of time just to do, just to go and update the core count, right? So we kind of automated all of this into the cluster aware workflow itself, so the customers don't really have to bother about. They can just trigger this operation maybe on a Friday evening. By the time they come back on Monday morning, all of their clusters will be updated with the total of 112 core count. So this is exactly what we mean by integrating some of these features, like dynamic CPU core and so on. Right? Secure core is something that is available with the latest generation. In fact, 21H2 supports a lot of secure core options. The latest 21H2 does support it, and to complement that, Dell also supports from a hardware standpoint, like Trusted Platform Module 2.0 and TLS version 1.2 and so on and so forth. So all of that is today available only on 15th generation. So not on the 14th generation. So if you're particular about some security features which are available in 21H2, I would suggest to go with 15th generation servers. So KSR is kernel soft reboot. So which means this is something that was recently introduced by Microsoft in 21H2 only. So which means it reduces the reboot of the operating system considerably. For example, they did a test on a normal server which has to go through the post sequence. It took about 4 minutes, and with KSR enabled, it just took about 20 seconds. So significant amount of time saving there, close to about 10 times the amount of time saving. Alright, so the next option is the one-click full stack software and hardware upgrades. So remember when I spoke about there are, as part of the complete lifecycle management of the Azure Stack HCI clusters, customers need to worry about two pieces, right? So one is the OS updates, which Microsoft keeps releasing every month as quality updates, or it could be quarterly updates. And then there is yearly updates, right? And Dell also, as part of the hardware update, keeps releasing the newer firmware bits and the BIOS bits and the driver bits every quarter. So customer needs to stay latest and the greatest as far as possible. So in order to do that, so all of this, as you can see, is a result of joint engineering between Dell and Microsoft. So they don't have to launch a different console to update both software and hardware. So you will see how they can, customers can do that. So let me just quickly jump back into the demo. So here I am in Windows Admin Center. Now if I click on, there's an option known as under the cluster manager called updates. So if I click on updates and then go into updates. So let me click on check for updates, right? So it will check whether there are OS updates available. So it has realize that there are security updates that are available for the operating system. So let me just click on the next hardware update. See, as you can see, now there is an OS update. There is also a hardware update, right? It's again, just like how we saw, how the Dell Open Managed integration was integrated well within the purview of the cluster creation wizard. Even here, even in the update wizard, the Dell Open Managed integration shows up. So you can just click on get updates and you provide the source, just like how we did last time. So it will go and pull whatever the software updates that are available. So and just click on next summary and then click on update, click on yes, and it starts downloading the binary bits. Okay, so this is huge value to customers, right? So that's a biggest thing that is possible only with the integrated system approach. And you just click on so now that the binary bits are downloaded, you just click on install, right? And the installation is going. So it's going and pushing both the software updates and also the operating system updates and also the hardware updates for both the nodes in the cluster. So remember, each of these nodes are actually started one by one, right? They're not just rebooted just once, right? So they are automatically triggered for a cluster aware update, and that's how both the nodes are updated. So this is a classic example of the joint engineering between Dell and Microsoft, right? Another option is single-click cluster aware update. Now this option, obviously, with the validated node, like I said, there is no guarantee that they would have built an extension which integrates into Windows Admin Center. Hence, all of this is not possible. And next few options. So let's look at one by one. Joint support with case exchange between OEM and Microsoft. So, for example, when customers call with an issue, it could be a cluster issue, right? Or it could be a hardware issue, right? So what we have is between Dell and Microsoft, we have a single ticketing exchange system, right? So if a customer calls with for instance, OS cluster issue, for instance, so and we determine that this has got to do with the Microsoft OS or something, then we exchange that ticket without asking the customer to log one more ticket with Microsoft. So we exchange that ticket internally between Dell and Microsoft. So Microsoft and Dell will jointly work together to resolve this issue for the customer. So customer does not have to again call these two parties separately, right? So that's what exactly means by joint case exchange between OEM and Microsoft. One-stop cluster level support for hardware and software. So irrespective of whether the customer buys the Azure subscription from Dell or not, or the guest operating system from Dell or not, we still support the customer at a cluster level. Like I said, if a customer today calls with a cluster issue, so that means not just the cluster, overall solution as such. It could be a networking stack somewhere, right? So this is where we support the customer at the entire stack, not just at the hardware. In case of validated node, like I said, it's just validated for the operating system. The same server is validated for other operating systems also, right? So when you call them and say I have a cluster issue, they'll say you may have to call Microsoft, right? There is no internal ticket exchange system between that OEM hardware partner and Microsoft. So all of this, as you can see, is a huge differentiator when it comes to integrated system. Azure Stack HCI certified parts replacement, right? So since we are at Dell, we are completely with integrated approach. Not just integrated, we are actually going with one step ahead, which is productized approach, which means we have a specifically designed product. As you saw, Azure Stack HCI in the bezel, it's specifically designed to run Azure Stack HCI operating system and clusters, right? So which means all of the components are certified to work for Azure Stack HCI. And it's a consistent global availability and support. Needless to say, so when you go with a productized approach, it's so much easier to support the entire solution stack as against a particular hardware, right? So this gives us a lot of flexibility, and not just that, we can extend these support boundaries for the customers just beyond just this bare metal, hardware to at the cluster level or the solution level support. So thereby, customers today really don't have to bother about, worrying or even worry about the hardware part of it, but because there is Dell and Microsoft to support them at a solution level. All right, so with that, I've come to the end of this episode. So in this episode, just to summarize, we looked at the differences between the Dell integrated systems versus the validated node approach adopted by a number of hardware OEM partners. We saw how the integrated system is really the way to go for many organizations out there, because they really don't want to get into the business of IT, right? If you really truly have to bring the cloud operating model onto on-premises, right? We saw that in the live demos as well, and also saw some critical mentions of various attributes that actually exist in an integrated system that brings a huge and tremendous value to many organizations approaching the cloud operating model on premises using Azure Stack HCI. I hope you really enjoyed this video. Please leave your valuable feedbacks, suggestions, and critiques in the comment section. In my next episode, I'm going to talk about what is Azure Arc. Until then, stay safe and stay tuned.